Buenos días a todos. Buenos días en este primer acto, esta primera presentación de un informe que estamos haciendo después de estas vacaciones, que espero que para todas hayan sido unas vacaciones estupendas, haya sido un tiempo de descanso y un tiempo para recuperar fuerzas después de estos difíciles tiempos que estamos, ¿no? Espero que todos estéis bien y espero que podamos pronto y cada vez más abiertos a hacer eventos en la línea tradicional o primero empezando con eventos híbridos y posteriormente pasar a la situación tradicional. Muchas gracias por estar aquí y por haber venido a esta presentación por parte de IRENA de este informe sobre 1,5 grados. Como sabéis, vamos a hacer el informe en inglés y por tanto I'm going to switch to English to present this report, the World Energy Transition Outlook, 1.5 degrees centigrade pathway by IRENA. We have with us two guests, very interesting guests. They knew very well the club. First of all is Dolf Gielen. You know him, maybe. He was here 2 years ago, I think so, introducing this report, and IRENA did for the European Union transitions too. Dolf is the director of IRENA's Innovation and Technology Center. Thank you, Dolf, for being here with us to present that. And Ricardo Gorini, Senior Program Officer of Renewable Energy Roadmaps from IRENA. Gracias, Ricardo. Thank you for coming. This is the first time that we asked for it. Well, this is our report about 1.5 degree pathways. You can download for free. There are a big report, there are a resume about this, there are different documents that you can do it. This document offers the different paths you can follow through this net zero by 2050. It includes the high level size, the high level technology choices, investment need, policy framework, and socioeconomic impact. It's very complete. I think you can study very well with two different scenarios, the planet energy and scenario at 1.5 degrees scenario. And well, they are going to make this presentation, as you can tell. This is very interesting. I was concerned with two of the main conclusions about this. There's one of this related to the benefit that the energy transition. No? $1 spent on this energy transition is going to value between 2 and 5.5 US dollars. This is a strong affirmation by the IRENA. No? And they also we have a very bright future, no? Because at the end of 2050, it will have 122 million jobs in the energy sector. This is something good for the people who will be there at that time. No, and not more for us, for me, and I think you can send the question and the question you will have to the chat, and you can send to the Pablo de Juan and the email Pablo de Juan at Enerclub.com. It is a pleasure having all of you here in this first presentation of this report. I'm going to give the floor to Dolf and Ricardo. They will organize the presentation whatever they want. Dolf, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Arcadio, and thank you very much for having us here again. It's a great pleasure to join, and of course Spain is one of the world leaders in energy transition, and Teresa Ribera plays a very active role in IRENA, so we're very happy to have this discussion. The work we will present today, so I will make a start, and then Ricardo will do the second part. It's in a tradition of doing energy scenario analysis. We've done that for some years, In the past, we have issued annual reports on 2-degree scenarios. This is the first year that we have looked into a 1.5-degree pathway. And a 1.5-degree pathway means a pathway with net zero CO2 emissions by mid-century. Next slide, please. The drivers are multiple. I mean, one is, of course, the policy imperative of doing something about climate change has greatly increased since the Paris Agreement. You may recall the agreement says aim for 2 degrees with an effort to reach 1.5 degrees, and there is more and more recognition around the world that we indeed need to limit climate change to 1.5 degrees if we want to avoid serious climate impacts. And that means decarbonization in the next 30 years. Now, policy is one driver, innovation is another driver. And one indicator for that is the significant cost reductions. We continue to see rapid cost reduction for key enabling technologies. What this graph shows is the trend for renewable power generation, the global average cost. And again, 2020, we saw record low cost. So 4 cents per kilowatt hour for onshore wind, about 5.7 cents per kilowatt hour on average global for solar PV, with many projects at much lower cost. At the same time, we see that the battery prices are falling. There's recently an issue around the cost of critical materials. We'll come to that point, but the trend is downward, and that is enabling also electrification of N2 sectors. And we see similar trends elsewhere. So this cost reduction makes that the renewables options are getting cheaper. At the same time, the cost of fossil fuels have increased very significantly in recent months. I think this is also a big part of the discussion in Spain, what is happening with electricity prices, for example. So that is very much driven by high natural gas prices, and that gap of cheap renewables and expensive fossil fuels is, of course, also helping to accelerate this energy transition. Next one, please. Now, last year was again a year with record high levels of renewables investments. There was around 261 gigawatts of renewable capacity added. And that means that the vast majority of new power generation capacity is renewable. And as a consequence, the share of renewables in global power generation is increasing by about a percentage point a year. So we were roughly at 30% renewables in the power generation mix, and that continues to increase. Main challenges, we need to accelerate that increase even further. Next one, please. So we see a number of priorities in energy transition for the coming, let's say for this decade. A major priority is to phase out coal power and replace that with clean power, notably renewables. To make that happen, we need to work on the flexibility of power systems to enable integration of high shares of solar and wind, and we need at the same time to electrify end users, notably electromobility and heat pumps. We see also an important role for clean and especially green hydrogen in this transition, especially also to decarbonize industry sector. And we also see an important role for sustainable bioenergy and also for CO2 capture and storage, and especially in combination with biomass, so BECCS, biomass CCS. And of course, all of that, all the supply side measures need to be combined with efficient use of energy and structural change to minimize energy growth worldwide. So I would say these general three trends, renewables, efficiency, and electrification, are key trends that are recognized in all the leading scenarios around the world on what energy transition should look like. Next one, please. Now, in a European context, of course, there is also important efforts needed. The target of 32% renewables will go up. That means that we need an increased effort. The combined national energy and climate plans already indicated that more was possible with renewables than the 32%, but still there's a few percentage points to be added. And of course, new developments such as floating offshore wind enable further growth if these are indeed rolled out at sufficient speed. Next one, please. So as said, I mean, and as Arcadio also pointed out, we did an analysis a few years ago where we found a potential of up to 37% renewables. At the time, we did not consider floating offshore wind and some other emerging solutions. So there's a plan to revisit this analysis starting soon. So this is upcoming. Next one, please. And so at the global level, from this World Energy Transitions Outlook, we have assessed what is necessary at this global level. At the same time, we're doing quite a lot of work at the level of individual regions. We're just completing the work for Central America. We have ongoing work in Southeast Asia. We're looking into more detail also into Indonesia and Malaysia. We just completed new work for the Southeast European region, and we're also completing new work for Africa. So to capture what can be done in different regions and in key countries, and how does that all add up to this global picture? We think that this transition for 2050 is technically and economically feasible, but it implies significant change on the supply side and on the demand side. Some of the changes needed. So some indicators for that are indicated here. So for example, renewable power needs to increase tenfold. You need to see massive use of electrolyzers and so on. We see a very important challenge for this decade, because it's not only what needs to happen in 2050, but what is really challenging is the rate of ramp up we need in this decade to really stay within this remaining carbon budget. And so renewable power needs to ramp up rapidly, electric mobility needs to ramp up rapidly, hydrogen needs to ramp up rapidly, CCS needs to ramp up rapidly, and it's not one of them, it's all of them together. So this is what's currently being discussed with the high-level dialogue on energy later this month in New York, and then with the COP26 in November in the UK. Next one, please. So what this graph shows is, first of all, what is needed in terms of renewables and energy demand development. So it shows the starting point and where our 1.5 degree pathway is in comparison to other scenarios out there. So you see, and what is also indicated here is which are the 2 degree scenarios and the 1.5 degree scenarios. So there is a consensus among all these scenarios that we need much more renewables, and it's also clear 1.5 degrees means that you cannot have a very significant energy growth. So you need much higher efficiency and intensity measures that are needed. Next one, please. And another indicator here is what needs to happen with electrification. So you see also all scenarios agree that we need much higher electrification rates. And the more we want to limit climate change, the higher the electrification rate that we need. So electricity really becomes the major clean energy vector in this transition, and that means that the combination of clean electricity, renewable electricity supply, and electrification is really central to this transition. Next one, please. And so here you see the breakdown for our 1.5 degree pathway, what the different strategies contribute to the total CO2 emission reduction. You see about a quarter is through supply side measures, replacing existing power with renewables, fossil power, and introducing biomass. You see the importance of energy efficiency measures. You see the importance of electrification in combination with more renewables, and you see the role of hydrogen and various types of CO2 management, including biomass CCS. So, but you see renewables, efficiency, and electrification together account for around 70% of the emissions reduction. We compare that with quite a lot of other scenarios, and on these three components, there is a consensus that these are key. Next one, please. Next one. So one of the issues that has recently received a lot more attention is the importance of critical materials for this transition, and here I show some numbers for the important ramp up of materials needs for battery production that will be needed. So on the left side you see the significant growth in battery materials that will be needed for this transition. For example, you need a lot more lithium, you need a lot more nickel for this transition. And that also has a significant impact on the absolute amounts of these materials that are currently mined. On the right-hand side, you see some scenarios of what alternatives exist. So there is not a single pathway to provide the batteries. There is some development also of lithium iron phosphate batteries for cars. If you follow such a pathway, then the critical material supply is less of an issue, but of course the performance of these cars is not exactly the same. It's more of a city car. So there are these type of trade-offs that need to be considered as the energy transition is developed, and this is one example of a dimension that is important, but there are other dimensions such as environmental impacts, such as geopolitical impacts that also need to be considered. So we're also looking at these various aspects. And later on, Ricardo will go a bit more into detail into the socioeconomic aspects, which of course are also critical. Next one, please. So here I will hand over to Ricardo for the second half of this presentation.
Thank you, Dolf. So as Dolf was explaining, there are important implications on what we understand are the challenges for the coming years. So this is, as you can see in the screen, is one very, very important implication. So the declining of fossil fuels, I must also say that those implications will require a lot of coordination and effort. So basically, integrated energy planning is something very, very key to make this transition. As Dolf explained, it's quite comprehensive, so we really need to move in all directions. So coordination is key in all the levels, sectorial related, but as well government related. So here, as we see, global will need a lot of reduction in coal. So the coal phase out is one key aspect of this transition this decade. And of course, oil is the second one that is really important to move forward in terms of decreasing consumption as well, supply. Natural gas, we understand, has an important role to play yet, but still something that will decrease and will change the use of gas over time. Next slide, please. So electrification with renewable and of course energy efficiency. So what you see here in the screen is the importance of scaling up very, very fast the renewable energy and electricity. So the 2050 number is really a key one. As you can see, we understand 90% of the amount of electricity generation will come from renewables, and around 60% variable renewable energy. And you can see the increase of capacity needs from now to 2050. So it's a very, very key aspect for the energy transition to increase the renewable energy penetration in the generation. Just to give you two numbers, it's the down left in the slides. By 2030, we are around 30,000 gigawatts of wind, 5,000 gigawatts of solar. So this is the amount of effort that's needed from the coming decades. It's really very important to get that right. So next slide, please. As electrification is a key component or driver, this applies to all the sectors. So especially, I would like to highlight here in this graph the importance of the scale of electrification penetration in all the end-use sectors. But if you look at those two sectors, especially transport and the green hydrogen, those are very interesting markets that are really increasing a lot in the coming decades. That, of course, has implications in terms of infrastructure and investment needs, especially the transformation in the transport sector. We will be discussing that soon. But the green hydrogen market is a very good opportunity to also make this transition in different sectors, especially hard to decarbonize and all of that. But of course, infrastructure is a must. So next slide, please. So indeed, electrification with efficiency and renewables are the drivers. And as I said, the variable renewable energy is increasing. So we need to invest and to organize ourselves a lot around the systemic innovation approach to be able to couple with these new solutions that will help us operate in the system, bringing flexibility especially, and of course, optimizing the combination of end use and supply at the same time. So what you can see here is also part of several studies, also free to download in our website. The Innovation Landscape Report, I do recommend you to have a look there. There are a lot of nice insights and solutions to bring this innovation in the power sector, especially 4 components, as you can see in this figure. So the enabling technologies that will help us with the solutions that are needed, especially the digitalization aspect, but also all the storage solutions that are needed to provide the flexibility solutions. But of course, it's not just about technology, we need to change business models, market design, the whole system operation, and this we explore those combinations very well in that report. So very interesting topic to dig dive. So next slide, please. So as we move, and the next slide, please. So as we move to this end-use sector contributions, if you like, in the energy transition, you can see now with the screen the importance of each sector. This is global, of course, but it gives you an idea of the importance of each sector in terms of emission reduction by 2050, but also the quality and the components that are needed. So again, I would like to highlight the transport aspect. The electrification of transport is key, together with hydrogen. So we will really need that infrastructure a lot in the coming decades. But in industry, we'll need a lot of effort, as you can see, especially hard to decarbonize. We'll need a lot of discussion there on how to bring new technologies. I will explore that a little bit further the next slides. And of course, in the context of Europe, I think buildings, especially the retrofit aspect, energy efficiency, as you can see, and electrification, the further electrification of buildings is a very important component. So next slide, please. So now moving more on this how to do things, right? So I think this slide is available in the report, and we discuss what are the measures, what are the key actions that are needed in each one of those components. So how is what we present? So this is what we present here. So you can see the different components as just presented, and you know those indicators, what we call these tracking indicators, and exactly what are the key actions. So for buildings, it's really important to really accelerate the efficiency aspect. So the scalability and designing specific policies and investments, finance related, of course, to scale the what we call the energy efficiency component of buildings. So basically the retrofit and all of this, but also the appliances, they need to really be more efficient. So we really need to give that to get that right. So the building renovation stock rate, the smart metering, and those are key aspects in buildings efficiency related. You can also see, in terms of heating, the importance of heat pumps, especially this applies to the European context. And also, not less important is the renewable energy direct use, so bioenergy, that's also played an important role. So we can think a little bit about how to change our heating systems, district heating, and using direct renewables and waste, and biomass, all of this. So hydrogen, we also consider this as a possibility in buildings, especially the greening the gas discussion. So this is, as you can see, another important component for buildings to get the emissions down. So that's what we understand. It's a portfolio of combination of measures that are needed. So please, next slide. The same tracking progress for transport brings here some important indicators. So again, in the middle of this table, you'll see the challenge in terms of how we need to move fast. Basically, I would say share of electricity, the energy consumption in transport, the direct use of biofuels there, and also the increasing of hydrogen in this process. And again, the implications or the key actions that are needed, as you can see, especially the infrastructure related investments to get the electrification of transport right, and we need to bring specific finance needs to scale the deployment of electric vehicles in the system, and allowing that oil and fossil related shift as presented before. So basically, this will apply for road transport, but we need really a lot in terms of the other transport components, and that are aviation and shipping. And that's how hydrogen plays an important role here, you know, through other synthetic fuels as well. We'll have a few slides later to explore that further, but this is also very important. So please, next slide. So what about industry, right? So as we understand, industry in the previous slides are the key component in terms of emission reduction, and what and how we will move forward in this case. So basically, again, energy efficiency in the whole industry is a very important component. But as you can see here in all those indicators, the electrification component combined with the direct renewable use, again, bioenergy, solar thermal, this is something that can help a lot in this decade and the following decades, of course. But again, hydrogen in this case, combined with CCS and BECCS, will play a key role. So basically, the hard to decarbonize sectors, we'll discuss cement, steel, especially, those are very key in terms of emission reduction in the coming decades. Next slide, please. And there are solutions, as you can see in the case of steel. We would need to move to the increasing electrification, the use of scrap, but also the hydrogen-based DRI, especially if you can import from different countries such as Australia and Brazil that are producing with green hydrogen, potentially will produce with green hydrogen. You can use this type of solutions, combined with other trade solutions to really bring emissions down. So next slide, please. In the case of cement, this is also a portfolio of solutions that must be applied. So we need to combine the efficient use of cement in the constructive buildings, etc. So less, I would say, cement, be more efficient on the use and efficiency, etc. But also direct renewable electrification as a key component. And here we bring some ideas in terms of the BECCS and the use of biomass combined. So here we really see a lot of investment needs in all those industries that would bring emissions down. Next slide, please. As said before, the shipping and aviation are key, in terms of emissions. So here we see a lot of potential for the synthetic fuels and also hydrogen derivatives such as ammonia. So we need to transform this industry, and there is a investment needs in terms of the retrofit of vessels, the new type of vessels that will be able to use those fuels. This new type of a market that will need to be put in place to trade these fuels, to get the infrastructure right, the ports, all of this. So we really see a transformation effort, including in Europe here, that are very important for this moving forward with this decarbonization. Next slide, please. In the case of, just to bring these numbers, right, in the case of the green ammonia, we see an important reduction coming in the next years. As we need to move to the green production. So basically, there is a need in terms of the electrolyzers cost reduction, but also, of course, to prepare the market to use cheap and renewable energy electricity to produce the green hydrogen. And then, of course, the ammonia that's related. So as you can see, the market price range, the coming years or decade will be hopefully achieved and will be competitive. So next slide, please. In the case of aviation, as I said before, again, we have a combination of renewable energy solutions that could play an important role. So the biofuel is the one that are really, I would say, more in the agenda now, but we'll need a combination later with synthetic fuels. So basically, there is an important potential in the world, you know, but not enough. If you look at the biofuel, we understand, and this is what we call this HVO. We will be able to produce more biofuels in that sense, but we'll need to bring other technologies that will complement that, and that's what you see here as the Fischer-Tropsch solution, etc. So here, basically, we need to scale up a lot. As you can see, the biojet fuel will really need to increase much more than the current trends. It's a challenge, but we understand also that it's a possibility. So next slide, please. So, of course, all this is coming with opportunity in terms of investment. Here we bring those two informations. One is the 100 trillions needed in the planet energy scenario anyway. So this is something we would need anyway. And for the 1.5C, we understand we'll need 30 trillions more than the planet energy scenario. So basically, that is around you know, total by 2054 trillions per year. So it's an important amount, of course, but as you can see, we need to shift the quality of those investments towards energy efficiency, renewables, you know, direct use, electrification, hydrogen, etc. So this is the key message to really shift and to take the opportunity now with this post-COVID to move forward on this trend. So next slide, please. Here, a little bit of granularity in terms of the investment components. I don't want really to go into each one of those, but of course that the power sector is taking an important sum in terms of amount, and you can see renewable energy related as well. So basically, grids and generation, renewable generation capacity is key. So next slide, please. So basically, now, next slide, yeah. I mean, basically now, to explore a bit further the implication in terms of socioeconomics, there are two or three main messages. So the first one is, we can do all of this with benefits to society and to the economy. We can see in this graph that we estimate that the GDP will be in a better position, if you like, compared to the planet and scenario. So this is a good message. So we will see the economies dealing with, you know, all this transformation without being harmed in a sense that this is doable. But of course, we need to be aware of the implications coming from climate damages. So basically, all these resiliency discussions that are increasingly coming into the agenda will really play an important role. Next slide, please. Again, society and jobs. Indeed, the job implications are very promising. Basically, we're talking about 100 million jobs in the energy sector. You can see the distribution there, but of course, renewable energy will play an important role. Next slide. We're talking about several trillions as well in renewables. Yes, next slide. Renewables specifically, as you can see in generation aspects, you know, each one of those. So I think this is an important message moving forward. We need to prepare for all those expertise needed, for all those jobs that are very promising. And this is what is behind this just energy transition. We need to get that right. It's not about just technology, but also about the policies that will get that, you know, social aspect just and equitable aspect related. So next slide, please. So just to finalize, I mean, the key messages, and perhaps Dolf would like to reinforce those. So please, Dolf, back to you.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. I mean, this was a fairly high-level overview of our insights. So, conclusion is we need a significant acceleration of the transition. We need more renewables on the supply side. We need more efficiency and more electrification. And it looks in principle affordable, but of course, you need to look sector by sector and technology by technology, how this transition, what is needed to make this transition happen. I mean, we showed you just some high level numbers, but we also provided some references to other studies where you can find in much more detail the policy, the enabling frameworks that are needed to make this transition happen. And so it's about policy, but it's also very much about innovation, and we still see a significant room to improve the performance of technologies and to reduce the cost further. So that is also very important. Move to the next slide. So there is a lot of more in-depth studies available. You find the report that describes the scenario on the website, but as I said, I mean, there's a lot of additional work we have published in the meantime that goes deeper. And what we're currently doing is to further detail the findings at the level of regions and key countries. So that is the big effort for the coming years, to really operationalize all these high-level visions and to translate it into practical action. So we're working very much with the member countries on this. So this concludes our presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dolf, and thank you very much, Ricardo. I apologize because I haven't read your CV, a very long CV, but next time you will be very well known here in Spain, and you are working with us many times. Okay, thank you very much. It was an outstanding presentation. You are showing the big effort we need to do to get this 1.5 degrees in 2050, very detailed measures, no, all around. I saw these slides with Ricardo, no, very small letter, a lot of measures, no? And now we are going to thank you for all of this, and I think the people can read it or can show. Can browse about all these reports you explained, Dolf. Now we are going to go to this Q&A session, and there are some questions, Pablo. Maybe this is very interesting for them to answer. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Arcadio. Thank you, Dolf and Ricardo, for your presentations. We have a couple of questions for you. There are three questions concerning electricity prices and the volatility that the wholesale market is experimenting, especially in Europe. So, as you know, there's big social, business, and industry concern about this. And the three questions are, can an increase in renewable energy contribute to decrease the wholesale market prices? That's one. Another one is, do you think prices will go down in the future or in the near future? And the third one is, if you think that this social concern can, say, turn against energy transition the way it's carried out in Europe nowadays.
Maybe I can make a start, and then Ricardo can add. So if you look at the fossil fuel prices in what has happened worldwide, but also what has happened in Europe, you see over the last 1.5 years a quite remarkable development. So you had these very low prices in May, June last year, and since both the oil price and the natural gas price has increased tremendously. And this increase of the electricity prices is of course directly related to the increase of the natural gas prices. And what has happened, I mean, I was just looking at the numbers for Germany, and coal has again overtaken wind as the main electricity source in Germany. But that is, of course, because gas is squeezed. And the renewables produce, once you have installed renewables capacity, the renewables produce at that capacity. But it's still not enough. We need to accelerate renewables further. And let's say the remainder of the electricity production is this interplay of these fossil fuels. And you also see it in the CO2 price. That is a very difficult situation because the ETS at the moment is at 65 euros per ton of CO2. And so it's the choice between very expensive natural gas with lower CO2 emissions or very polluting coal power and then paying a high CO2 price. And to me, the solution longer term seems to indeed increase renewable power significantly. And I think everybody agrees on that. The question is, to what extent can we accelerate that process? Because it's not going to happen overnight. And there is important planning hurdles and regulatory hurdles to be dealt with in that process. And the fact that we're moving to electrification makes it even more important that we deal with the enabling framework and allow this accelerated transition. And of course, Spain is very well placed in that context, with because of its resource endowment, etc. So, is this a problem? I think we need to be very careful in explaining what is going on and what is causing these price increases. Because this recent price increase is not because of renewables, it's the fossil fuels. And is affordability and is just transition critical for this transition? Absolutely. And that's why we're paying so much attention to the socioeconomic benefits. And we think a lot more work needs to be done there because acceptance will be critical to make a successful transition. Maybe Ricardo wants to add.
Thank you, Dolf. Yeah, I think that this is key, right? I mean, the social aspect in the transition will allow the process moving and accelerated, because otherwise we will hear a lot of pushback, and that applies, of course, for this transformation of the fossil industry and the implications in terms of jobs. For instance, we know the coal situation, and that's not maybe just coal, but we'll need to manage that carefully. Europe has an important role in that side, and just to add to this pricing aspect, and also maybe to bring here the component that's related to energy security. Indeed, the renewables can help with this energy security. In the case of Spain, I know this is very important as well. So how we increase the use of our resources, so we avoid being exposed to this volatility in terms of price, and also potential as well in terms of resources. In the case of natural gas, for instance, maybe there are some possible issues that may happen. So basically, the renewable is also a solution from that side, and there is a value for that, right? So there is a value for that. It's good to have renewables in that sense, local resources, and you can manage all of these, and this is an important contribution. And as Dolf mentioned as well in those first slides, there is a cost reduction that are happening in all renewables, especially wind and solar. So I think definitely we understand that in the coming years this will be also the case, and we will see increasingly the penetration of new records and so on. I mean, at the end, we understand renewables will help price reduction over time.
Okay, thanks very much, Ricardo. They ask you if you can explain the business case to use hydrogen in heavy truck transport.
Yeah, so in commercial vehicles, there's a number of market segments. An important segment there is delivery vans, and delivery vans we see going electric. Trend is clearly in that direction. For the heavy trucks, heavy duty trucks, long distance, it's still, I would say the jury is still a little bit out. But we see also increasingly a shift towards electric trucks. And basically they benefit from the cost reduction for batteries that comes with the scale up of battery production for cars. So we had a dedicated event on that with the European Pentalateral Forum last year, and that was a clear trend that came forward there. But of course, there is also some progress in using hydrogen for heavy-duty trucks. For example, Switzerland has a quite significant program in that area. The question is a bit: will these two solutions coexist as we go forward? And yeah, I must say we don't have the answer yet. I mentioned this issue of battery material costs that has recently come to the forefront. That will probably somewhat impact this cost reduction trend for these batteries. And for the hydrogen side of things, of course, the question is, well, how quickly will the supply of clean hydrogen really ramp up? We see an important role for green hydrogen going forward, but we need to have then the renewable power capacity in place to produce that green hydrogen, and we need to have the electrolyzer capacity in place. And we're very, very far from having significant amounts of green hydrogen, and a lot needs to happen. And of course, there are ambitious plans also for Spain with the high deal process, etc., to add tens of gigawatts or even more of green hydrogen. But let's see how quickly that really happens. I mean, there has been quite some pushback on blue hydrogen in recent times. I mean, there was one paper which received a lot of attention, but I must say also a lot of critique. What is now the greenhouse gas benefits of blue hydrogen? So maybe that needs to be understood also a bit better before we move forward with that solution.
Thank you, Dolf. Ricardo, you wanna add something?
Perhaps just to bring the importance of this integrated energy approach again, because as we need to move in all directions, all end use, and there is this energy matrix change over time, and this question is related to one aspect, but it's really linked with all the others, as Dolf was explaining. I think we really need to enhance a lot this coordination and all the efforts that are needed in the different, I would say, careers and sectors. So, of course, some strength in institutions that are dealing with such kind of policy discussion is very important.
Thank you, Ricardo. There are two questions on technology. One of them is, how is nuclear technology integrated into your scenarios? And then there's another one on CCUS, where you mentioned that it accounts for 13% industry reduction of CO2, but we don't hear that much about CCUS and the state of the art of technology compared, for example, with hydrogen. So they're asking you, what's the state of the art of CCUS, and when do you see it feasible in the near future also?
Yeah, on nuclear, I'll leave to Ricardo, but on the CCUS, we are also just completing a new report on that. We hope to issue that next month or so. We don't see a significant role for CCUS in the power sector, but we see a very important role, especially in industry. And that's then industries such as blast furnace steel making process, such as cement kilns, ammonia production. The deployment to date has been a bit disappointing. Less than 50 million tons of CO2, which is captured and stored worldwide, mainly related to enhanced oil recovery. We have a lot of CCS in our scenarios, in the order of 7 gigatons by 2050. And a big part of that is biomass CCS as negative emission option. At the moment, it's not widely deployed. We see that there is now a couple of I would say, pilot projects for CCS in the cement industry, some in Norway, Sweden, Canada, etc. On the blast furnaces, I'm not aware of any processes. There's one DRI, gas-based DRI plant in the UAE that uses CCS for enhanced oil recovery. But so there is a long way to go before we are on this pathway that we have outlined, and CCS is one of the big question marks there.
Thank you, Dolf. And nuclear, Ricardo?
The nuclear, not sure if I got the question right, is how important nuclear is important in the process, right? So that okay.
Yeah, in your scenarios, how is nuclear taken into account?
Yeah, so basically we have nuclear in our scenarios until 2050. Basically they keep the same, I would say, amount over time. As we understand, and this is basically competitiveness. I mean, we understand that nuclear, if you look at the other alternatives, nuclear is still very expensive, So basically, we don't see nuclear as a cheap solution, especially dealing these investment that are needed, upfront and are quite high. All this management in terms of risk, etc. It's difficult to see this moving faster and increasing vis-a-vis the cost reduction as discussed before, or renewables. So I don't know, maybe Dolf would like to complement, but this is what we have in our scenarios.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question says, $4.4 trillion per year of required investment until 2050 is a huge amount. Do you think companies and capital markets can afford such an outstanding amount? And if you have studied a sort of financial planning?
Yeah, of course, it's a big amount, but compare it to a global GDP in the order of 100 trillion today and 250 trillion in 2050. So that's one way to put it into context. Or you can also say it means an increase of energy investments by about a third compared to the reference date. So energy is an important part of the global economy, one way or the other. Maybe Ricardo wants to add.
Yeah, and also as part of the report and the analysis, we did this assessment on the financeability, right? And we understand both public and private sector are important. So it's not just public funds that will be there. Of course, private is even more important. And if you look at the companies that are already investing in this energy transition, we understand this is still, I mean, they are the ones that could bring that investment to the ground. So this kind of assessment identifies that it's feasible. So there is no really a problem with funds availability, etc. But we need, of course, to get the quality of the investment right. And that's the mix as presented before. And of course, there are some specific policies and instruments that will be needed to, I would say, to incentivize this type of investment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Ricardo and Dolf. Arcadio, it's already 1 o'clock. I think we've read pretty much most of the questions. So if you want, we can finish with the webinar.
Okay, thank you very much, Rolf and Ricardo. No, it's a pleasure having you here, as I told you before, and we will see you in the near future, no? Because I think you are going to continue with this report about this key question. As you can see, there were a lot of interest on this kind of issues, and see you in the near future presenting here that. Okay, thank you very much. Muchas gracias a todos por estar aquí. Como os he dicho al principio, esperemos que las próximas ya las podamos hacer en unas condiciones más parecidas a las que teníamos siempre. Un saludo para todos y buenos días. Good morning to everybody. Good morning. Thank you very much. Bye.